It is a pleasure to speak today about Australia's resources and manufacturing industries, and could I thank CEDA again for the opportunity to do so, and the fact that we do meet, as they say, in interesting times, and there being a general recognition that the nature of Australia's economy is changing, and dare I say, the bleeding obvious, changing forever. While our traditional industries are undergoing a transformation, they are also moving into a new era of opportunities and job diversity. Our economy is evolving in response to technical changes, advances in global supply chains, and greater product integration with the service sector. But we're not alone, and the phenomenon we're seeing here is consistent with what's happening in other developed countries and economies. Industry in Australia has reached a turning point as part of this ongoing transformation, with two major sectors now in that transformation. We've seen a change in direction by one of the nation's economic workhorses, that is the mining industry, as the mining boom transitions from the investment phase to the production phase. We are also seeing at the same time a winding down in car manufacturing in Australia ahead of the impending closure of the Ford, Holden and Toyota car-making plants. The first is a part of the natural business cycle where the period of elevated capital spending on mine expansion and construction is followed by a period of increased production. The second stems from pure business decisions, informed by the interplay of the high Australian dollar, a highly competitive car market, and relatively small production numbers, in fact, in some cases almost minute by world standards these days. Some commentators have interpreted the end of the mining investment boom as the beginning of the end of the sector's economic clout, or in fact the sector itself. Others have seized on the impending car plant closures to suggest that it signals the approaching end of the manufacturing industry in this country. Can I say both these interpretations are very wrong? The resources sector hasn't run out of steam. In fact, there's evidence that it continues to do the heavy lifting of our economy. And the end of the car manufacturing in Australia is not the end of Australian manufacturing. The changes taking place are a wake-up call for us to take effective action to identify new opportunities and get on the front foot in the never-ending global race to build the sectors of the future. That said, neither the continued success of our resources sector nor our capacity to make the most of emerging industries can be taken for granted. Like other sectors of our economy, both depend on investment, and investors will put their money where they believe the business environment is right. That is why the number one industry priority for this government, our government, is to set the right policy frameworks to encourage investment and business growth. We mean it when we say that Australia is open for business. I will elaborate on these matters, starting with the Australian economic linchpin, the resources industry. There is no doubt that Australia is a giant of the global mining industry. We are building our status as the energy superpower of the world. But it is essential that we get our economic settings right and cut the burden of unnecessary red tape. At a domestic level, the resources and energy sectors have in recent years given us an economic backbone unequalled in our nation's history. The mining sector generates 10% of the Australian GDP from just 2% of its workforce, the highest ratio of an industry in our economy. As Australia's population ages and more people in the labour force approach retirement age, industries like mining that generate the best return on labour will become even more important than ever. Our nation has indeed benefited immensely from the surge in investment in the resources and energy sector over the past decade. It's no exaggeration to say that these sectors have been doing the heavy lifting in Australia's economy, and it's not hard to find the evidence to back this up. In 2012-13, these sectors generated around $176 billion in export revenues, and our resource exports are continuing to grow. The substantial investment of the past few years delivering big increases in the volumes of exports. The March quarter national accounts confirm that growth in the mineral and energy commodity exports has been the main driver of economic growth in Australia. These national account figures show that the economy grew by 1.1% for the quarter, taking our annual economic growth rate to 3.5%. It's the fastest rate in almost 2 years, and remarkably, the mining industry accounted for 80% of that growth. Therefore, it is absolutely a bit premature to suggest that the industry is running out of steam. The holistic view of the industry is more helpful than a piecemeal one. If anything, it can be argued that the mining boom continues through the production phase, and there's a reason for this. The past decade saw unprecedented investment in the resources and energy sector, with over $400 billion in new projects, which created construction jobs and created growth in regional areas. The purpose of these investments was to increase the production of minerals and energy commodities. This production phase has now only just started and has many, many years to run. It will support jobs, regional expenditure and government revenues, most importantly, for decades to come. The future of the sector remains bright. I acknowledge that investments in the resource and energy sector have slowed, but we shouldn't forget that it's coming off some remarkable highs, and we need to look at the historic averages before we jump to any conclusions. While commodity prices will be lower, export volumes will be higher, which will deliver a sustained period of economic benefits for Australia. The latest forecasts by BRE are instructive. For example, Australia's iron ore export volumes are projected to increase from 527 million tonnes in 2012-13 to a whopping 850 million tonnes in 2018-19. Our LNG exports are also expected to more than triple from 24 million tonnes in 2012-13 to 80 million tonnes in 2018-19 and set Australia on the path of becoming the world's largest LNG exporter. Overall, BRE estimates that Australia's resources and energy exports will grow to over $280 billion by 2018-19, up from $176 billion in 2012-13. As prosperity and consumption levels continue to rise across Asia, our substantial mineral and petroleum resources, as well as our geographical location, will stand us in good stead in servicing key markets in the region. Despite our strengths, challenges do exist. Lower prices in most commodity markets caused by a surge in global investment in the resources and project sector over the last 5 years remain a concern. The silver lining here is that in the increasing consumption that occurs across almost all mineral and energy commodities, including coal, will see an opportunity. The shift from the investment phase to the production phase is also not without its challenges given the size and speed of the reduction in investment. In addition, growing international competition from emerging mining regions around the world is shaping to be a significant challenge, and some of these regions offer much greater opportunities for low-cost mining operations than Australia. Low productivity is another issue. In the past decade, the growing commodity prices supported higher wages and masked declining productivity, and that's an issue which the mining industry will need to address. Australia now finds itself at the wrong end of the supply cost curve for many commodities, and Australian resource companies have responded by driving cost reductions and productivity programs to meet the increasing competition in their markets. The fact is, we cannot afford to be complacent over the mining sector's success. The current high volume of production and positive outlook will not shield us from the challenge. The sector needs the right policy settings in addition to the individual efforts of the producers if we are to sustain our increasing prosperity from resources. This is an overriding priority of our government to support the sector. The government's approach is simple. We get rid of policies that impede growth, we introduce those that assist growth, and we cut red tape and green tape. The first cab off the rank is the infamous toxic duo, the mining tax and the carbon tax, which we are determined to get rid of, and their end is nigh. They are sending the wrong signals to investors, increasing business costs and generating needless paperwork. The second item of business to address is, of course, excessive regulation. Each year, excessive regulation costs businesses hundreds of millions of dollars, with environmental approvals of major resource projects amongst the major culprits. And that's why the government and the states and territories have agreed to establish a one-stop shop for environmental approvals, as we have in offshore approvals. This new approach is already making a big difference, with projects worth $500 billion receiving environmental approvals since we came to government in September last year. Another thing is that the government's holistic view of the sector means we're also paying attention to the exploration area, a crucial part of mining momentum. We are delivering on our pledge to invest $100 million in the exploration development incentive for greenfields mineral exploration, and I don't need to labour the point that the future of mining relies on exploration, because today's exploration activities are tomorrow's mining projects. I note that the sector has reduced costs. That one way the sector has reduced costs is to reduce exploration activities. In the long run, however, this will hinder development of the next wave of mining development in Australia. Our government is committed to encouraging mineral exploration, and the government's exploration development incentive will support small and medium-sized companies to attract investment here in Australia. And can I say that next week will mark the beginning of that scheme, and I'll be in Western Australia to launch, as you should with any good initiative, the introduction of that program twice, once formally in Perth, but again, just as importantly in Kalgoorlie, which some would say is the heart and home of the hard rock mining in Australia. In the energy sphere, the government is developing a long strategic policy framework for securing Australia's future domestic energy needs. We are pursuing this work through the Energy Green Paper and then the Energy White Paper, which will provide a framework to reduce cost pressures on businesses and households, improve Australia's international competitiveness, and most importantly, grow our export base. If I can now turn to manufacturing, what does the future hold here? The manufacturing industry is an important part of Australia's economy, employing some 8% of our workforce and generating some 7% of our GDP. It also contributes around a quarter of total expenditure, business expenditure on R&D. But the industry is now in transition, even though this is nothing new. Industry is always in transition. Manufacturing contributes to the GDP and is currently around half of what it was in the 70s. Australia's manufacturing is evolving in response to technology, the global environment, and enhanced focus on service orientation. And this evolution is necessary, and we should welcome it. I believe there's a strong future for manufacturing in Australia, but the future will be a different future to that which we have traditionally known. The reality is that the type of manufacturing we have known for decades, that is scale-intensive manufacturing, is no longer sustainable in Australia. Scale-intensive manufacturing requires a large domestic market, something that Australia simply does not have. And besides, Australia has a high cost base. The future of Australian manufacturing lies in innovation-intensive, high-value-added, export-orientated manufacturing that competes on quality, not price. If Australia wants to compete with the world's best, our companies need to shift from a narrow focus on manufacturing components to a much wider focus. We must look at product integration and ways to combine manufacturing with a range of other services. Working with business, the government will steer industry policy and support towards harnessing Australia's entrepreneurship, innovation and research. And can I say, the CSIRO will play an incredibly important and fundamental part in that, as will all science. We want to see more of Australia's great ideas turn into great global products, and the government is reorientating its policy to support this goal. The 2015-16 budget sets out a new policy direction for the industry. It is one which provides the right framework to encourage the next wave of entrepreneurship and investment in the industry's future. We are redirecting industry assistance away from corporate welfare towards programs which facilitate innovation and self-reliance. At the centre of this new policy approach is the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program, which will deliver $484 million to improve the capabilities of small and medium enterprises and streamline business access to government programs. The government envisages for our manufacturing sector may require business to diversify into more advanced productions. For that reason, this year's budget has allocated $50 million in the Manufacturing Transition Grants Program. This is part of our commitment to help traditional manufacturing businesses make the transition to areas of growth. It is also in addition to the $155 million invested in the Growth Fund to help the automotive component manufacturers, auto workers and affected regions make the transition to other industry sectors and new jobs as a result of the closure of car manufacturing in Australia at the end of 2017. I'm confident that the industry investment and competitiveness agenda we are pulling together as we speak will also be of great benefit to the manufacturing sector. I'm working closely with the Prime Minister, the Treasurer and the Trade Minister on this agenda, and I expect it to be ready later this year. It will seek to boost competitiveness, enhance productivity, lower business costs, encourage innovation and strengthen the overall economy. Can I say in conclusion that this is a period of significant transition for Australian industry that is set to continue, as it always has, well into the future. In the resources sector, the transition is part of the natural business cycle that may repeat itself in the future through more exploration, more investment in the construction of new mines and ultimately increased production activities. In manufacturing, the change is more likely than not, in fact I'm certain it will be, irreversible, as Australia is better placed to support high value-add advanced manufacturing. But there is no doubt that both our resources and manufacturing industries have served us well and will continue to do so if we steer the right course and make the right choices. For industry, that means embracing change and innovation to increase business competitiveness, workforce productivity and access new markets internationally. For government, it means improving the policy and regulatory environment to help business thrive and to open the nation's doors to investment and jobs. Thank you.